Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Good morning, Gertrude. Thank you ever so much for having me. My name is Laura Malmstrom and I'm based in the UK, and I am what would be known as a consciousness teacher or a mindset guru, depending on who you're talking to. And I help people to move through trauma and neurodiversity so that they can live a happier and healthier life and start something that I like to call the joy revolution, which will benefit all of us. And I'd love to tell you a bit about my story. So, the day that my mind broke was the day my consciousness woke up. I was 15 and I'd been self-harming for years, cutting as a way to feel something, anything, when the world felt too loud and I felt too small. Now that night, I finally told my mother, and I watched her face fall. I watched her heart break in real time, and then I broke too. I cried, I screamed, and I melted down for hours. 8 years of pain exploded out of me in one night. And then nothing. I just woke up the next day, completely numb. And in that numbness, I had a thought: if my brain can switch off this much pain overnight, what else can it do? Now, I need to take you back to show you why that numbness mattered. I want you to picture a 10-year-old girl. She's sitting alone at the edge of a playground and she's watching the other children play. She doesn't know how to join in. She never has. The sounds are too loud and the rules don't make any sense, and nobody seems to notice she's there except for when they actually do. And when they do, it's to mock the way that she talks, the way that she moves, the way that she is. She goes home, and home isn't safe either. The adults are either busy or angry or falling apart themselves. So she becomes invisible, a good girl, no trouble. She learns to carry everything alone. Now that girl was me. And what I didn't know then, what nobody knew, was that I was autistic and I also had ADHD. My brain was completely wired differently, and the world felt like static that I couldn't tune out. By 13, I was self-harming, and from the age of 11, I was suicidal. I had spent years convinced that the world would be a better place without me in it. But then came that breakdown, the numbness. I became completely obsessed. If my mind could shut off pain like flipping a switch, maybe I could flip other switches too. Maybe I could reprogram it. So I dove into meditation, neuroplasticity, psychology, and trauma theory. I was a mad woman hunting for treasure, and I found it right there in the center of myself, the subconscious mind, the operating system that runs beneath everything. Now, our minds are like computers. Most of us are running on default settings, programs that were installed by trauma, by childhood, by pain. But here's the thing. We can rewrite the code. And I started to reprogram myself. Slowly, things shifted. I got back to school. I did my GCSEs and I did actually get into sixth form. I thought I had cracked it, but I hadn't. Not yet. Because at 17, I tried weed. And weed felt like a warm hug that I'd been searching for my whole life. But that hug led to harder drugs that led to addiction. And I dated men 15 years older than me that saw me as a broken little girl and knew exactly how to keep her broken. There was mental abuse, there was lies, there was infidelity. And throughout it all, I just kept sabotaging myself, flipping between addictions and eating disorders and sleeping around, hating myself, lying, stealing, cheating. I became somebody I didn't recognize. Now, one night at a rave, high out of my mind, I was ranting to a friend about my terrible life and how unfair everything was, about how I was the victim of it all. Now, he looked me dead in the eye and he said to me, "You are your own problem. You are your own solution." And I could have punched him in the throat. Did he hear me? I was the victim. But that sentence, well, it planted a seed. Months later, I was staring at myself in the mirror, like really looking at myself. And I asked myself, how is this my fault? Like, not in a shameful way, in a curious way, like in a, what if I had more power than I think here kind of way? And that question began to change everything. I went on a journey. I read thousands of books. I worked with shamans, with witches, with therapists and healers. I took ayahuasca and I met God. I took mushrooms and I met my inner demons. I went back to college and then university. And piece by piece, I rebuilt my brain and my life. And along the way, I realized something. Traditional healing and therapy has everything backwards. We spend years talking about our problems, analyzing our thoughts, trying to change our behaviors from the top down. But that's not how the brain works. That's like trying to change your computer by yelling at the screen. So I created something different and I call it the Malmstrom method. And here's how it works. Step 1, you reprogram the subconscious. This is where real change happens. Beneath conscious thought is where your beliefs and your patterns live. Through hypnosis, visualization, and somatic work, we rewrite that code. Number 2 is shift your thoughts and behaviors. Once the subconscious shifts, your conscious mind begins to follow. Suddenly, the things that felt impossible feel doable. And step 3 is align with something bigger than yourself. Now, I like to call this GUS, God, Universe, Source, whatever resonates with you. When you stop fighting life and you start flowing with it, magic happens. Now, this method saved my life. And I realized that if I could survive rape and bullying and abuse, neurodivergence, trauma, addiction, psychosis, and come out of this, the other side, as somebody who feels joy, maybe this could work for other people. Now, in 2017, I started my business and I started a thing called the Joy Revolution, because here's what I know to be true. Hurt people, but healed people heal the world. Now, every person who sees themselves, who heals themselves, sends ripples outward. Your healing affects not only your family and your community, but also the stranger that you smile at on the street. It's the butterfly effect, but for consciousness. We are the generational curse breakers, and the Joy Revolution has grown beyond anything I imagined. And every single person I work with proves the same thing. You're not broken. You're not too damaged. You're not beyond repair. You're just running on old software. And software can be updated. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, wow, she's special to have survived all of that, stop. I'm not special. I'm tenacious, and I refuse to let my pain win. I refuse to believe the story that my brain was telling me. And if I can do it, so can you. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to believe in yourself, even just a little bit. And when you can't find that faith, borrow some from Gus. Life is happening for you, not to you. If you've been through hell, it's because you have a great mission. You have the power to rewrite your story, not from your wounds, but from your wisdom. And the question is, are you ready to reprogram?
Wow. What an incredible journey you've been on, Laura. Absolutely incredible. For everything that you've gone through to come out on the other side and now empowering other people to find this path is really phenomenal. Now, I want you to take us back to that defining moment, the day your mind broke open. What did that feel like?
Oh, it was a lot. I don't know if you've ever seen an interview with a vampire, because it kind of displayed it perfectly for me, I find. In that moment when Brad Pitt gets turned into being a vampire, suddenly everything seems very different. The world is in different colors, smells are more extreme, and he's experiencing life on a whole new level. And for somebody that has, that had spent from the age of 11 suicidal, like to the point where I could barely speak, I was just kind of like a zombie almost walking around because I was under so much pain. When that numbness broke, it was such relief. It literally felt as if I had just been sort of turned from one thing to another thing, and I think if you watch that moment in Interview with a Vampire, you can just see the difference that he experiences going from human to non-human. And it felt like that. It felt like such an extreme change that it almost felt like anything could have happened in that moment and it just wouldn't have affected me. And that numbness was so freeing for me in those moments because I'd been under so much weight and so much pain for such a long time.
Wow. So what does reprogramming the subconscious really mean in everyday language?
Well, it's looking at the things that are running underneath. So we kind of have our conscious thoughts that we know that we're thinking. We're thinking, oh, that's nice. I like that. I like him. I like her. We have these kind of ideas that come into our brains and we're aware that they're happening. On the subconscious, there's programs that we're not really aware that are happening that tend to be rooted in childhood or trauma or things that our parents have said, things that teachers have said. And a lot of these things often don't really serve us. We sometimes have kind of like the good girl programming that I had, to be a good girl meant to not cause any trouble and be quiet and to help the adults around me. And this was instilled in me from school where, I had where you're rewarded for being a good girl and joining in and helping teachers and things. Now, that sounds like a really helpful program to have. But actually, if you have it running without any discernment, that turns into people pleasing and it turns into something that can turn into quite self-harm. I see a lot of women that I work with that have no boundaries at all. And they don't know how to get out of the good girl programming because they spend their whole lives trying to please other people so that they can stay within that programming. To rewrite it is to become aware of what's going on and why we're doing the things that we're doing. So it's that deeper knowledge underneath the conscious thought. It's like, okay, I know I like making people happy and trying to please people. Well, why is that happening? And when you can find out the root of these things, if they're not actually helpful to us and they cause us problems, what we can do is uproot it and we can put in new programming. And that's what I do with my clients. We take out all of the trauma-based, all of the unhelpful programs that are running underneath the system and put in something that actually benefits them, and not only benefits them, but benefits the world. Because I think that, it's a radical thought, but being selfish is selflessness. People think that, being selfless is great. Give to everybody. But it's like, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
So I teach my clients to be willfully selfish so that they can be the best people that they can be for everybody else around them that needs them. And that starts with deprogramming a lot of the stuff that we've got underneath our conscious thought.
It's interesting. So how did you first realize that your mind could switch from pain to peace?
So I think when I was younger, I obviously, when I had a nervous breakdown, I was very, very mentally unwell. And I was suffering from quite bad psychosis. I was hallucinating and seeing like spiders and hands coming through the walls and all sorts of things. There was dark shapes in my bedroom, all sorts of very horrific, terrifying things. And, I was going to be sectioned. I was obviously under a lot of medical care at that point as well. So I was seeing a psychotherapist and a psychiatrist and the community mental health team at my GP. And somebody along the line recommended a book to me that was called How to Lift Depression Fast. And it was a radical approach where it was just kind of like, just stop being depressed, but in a bigger, better way than saying it like that. Because I know when people say, well, just stop. And it's like, well, how? That's not really helpful, is it? But what it talked about was how you can slowly sort of shift your mindset from one to another by some of this kind of, subconscious reprogramming. And it talked about neuroplasticity. And from there, it just planted this seed for me that I became obsessed with, because autism, we have our hyper focuses, and, psychology has been one of mine for the last sort of 25 plus years now. So you just kind of get your hooks into a topic and you can't let it go. And it's been one of my special interests for this whole time. And I just became obsessed with kind of neuroplasticity. And I was like, well, if I can shift depression, if I can become numb and change all of these things, and it's literally just the brain switching up these pathways, what else can I do? And then I started to look into like visualization techniques and things like that. And they were doing studies with people who were in the Olympics and so forth, and showing that visualization and practice in the mind was just as effective as practice in real life. So they've got studies at the moment that show that people who practiced on a piano or practiced in their mind playing the piano actually saw the same levels of competency increase. So it's like, you don't even need to be doing the thing. So then I recognized that no matter the fact that I was kind of trapped, I lived in the countryside when I was a kid. So I was in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't have any friends. I didn't go out. So there was no social life for me. I didn't go to clubs or do anything like that. So it was very hellish for me, because it was bad at school and it wasn't great at home. And then you're just trapped there the whole time. And that was part of the problem for me, was that I couldn't see a way to get out of this situation because I couldn't physically get out of it. Yeah. So this idea opened up this thought to me that if I can't get out in reality, can I get out in my mind? And then because of visualization and practice in the mind, I thought, well, if I imagine that I'm somewhere else, does that do the same benefit as actually being somewhere else? Nice. And I started to kind of, maybe it's kind of a bit sort of maladaptive daydreaming, certainly. But, I started to kind of daydream my life being elsewhere, being someone else, doing different things. And that's kind of what I've managed to manifest in my life is actually who I wanted to be when I dreamt of it. And I promised when I was 15 to myself, like, we're going to get out of this, because I was really suicidal. I've been suicidal for a very long time. So I wanted to just die. It was too painful to live. And I said to myself, look, I promise you, if you don't kill yourself and you just get through this, we're going to build something. We're going to build a life that is worth living for. And I've kept that promise to myself. And that's the promise that I live to myself every single day. I get up and I do things that make me feel good and joyful. That's the joy revolution. And I make that, by helping other people, it makes all of this other stuff worthwhile going through. So, trying to step outside of the pain that you're in by visualization and using those powers, actually, I managed to kind of rewrite my brain and rewrite my experience of life through my imagination first, before I started to do anything actively in real life, because I was ultimately a child who was quite trapped in the middle of nowhere with no bus service.
Oh my gosh. Now, You mentioned something when we first met. You said that a stranger once told you that you are your own problem and you are your own solution.
Mm.
How did that shift your perspective on healing?
I mean, that was a real punch in the guts when he said that to me, because I find that, and this is so common for everybody, and it's one of my bitter pills that I make my clients swallow, but it's one of the best things that you'll ever hear, and the best thing that you'll ever learn, if you can hear it, is that you're not a victim. And it really sucks. And if you're listening to this and you're still in the victim mindset, I'm so sorry. But if you can hear it, those with ears to hear, I promise you this one will help you. It's that recognition that you have power in every situation, even when you feel like you have no power. Okay. And the problem with the victim mentality and the victim mindset is that you have no power, and you are disenfranchising yourself and giving your power to your circumstances and the person that's harmed you. And that phrase, you are your own problem, you are your own solution, handed me back my empowerment, because instead of focusing, which what I was doing when I was talking to this person, I was focusing on everybody else that had caused these situations in my life. And of course that's truthful, because I was a kid. I was like under the age of 18 when most of this stuff happened. And of course, it wasn't my fault, but it's my responsibility to fix it. Because ultimately the people that harm you, they either are incompetent, and most people are incompetent. Most people are not these evil, narcissistic, psychopathic, Machiavellian characters that are going out to, malign you and abuse you. Most people are incompetent. So if they're incompetent, how on earth could they possibly be competent to fix the problem that they've created through their own incompetence? And what I recognized is that it wasn't my fault, but it was my responsibility. And every time I shirked that responsibility by becoming the victim, I gave my empowerment back over to the person that caused the problem in the first place. So if we can recognize, I call it the crown of victimhood, which really sucks. But if you can take that crown off and instead of reveling in it, recognize that you have choices, you have power in every situation. And I understand, there's people that are in, war situations. There are people in, terrible, horrific situations around the world. And it's easy to say when it's like, when it's just depression or it's just mental health stuff, because in comparison to somebody in a war situation, there is no comparison. But what we recognize is that in every single situation, you have the opportunity to change things within your mind, and you have the opportunity to change your mindset. And you also have the opportunity to look at the positives that are around you. And there are always choices. There's always opportunities for positivity, and there's always opportunities for joy in every situation, no matter the situation you're in. And that, I know that sucks, but there's people who have gone through significantly worse than me, prisoners of war camps and people in North Korea, for instance. If you don't keep that mindset that you have a choice and there's freedom and there's joy to be had, there's no way that you'll ever survive the circumstances you're in, whatever they are. So it's vital.
Trapped.
Yeah, it's vital that we all shift our mindset and recognize that, you are not a victim. And the second you become a victim of anything, anyone, an idea, an MP, a politician, any of these things, is that you completely give your power over to that person. And if they're causing you harm, they don't care enough to keep you safe. So there's no point. There's no point in giving them your power. Keep your power for yourself. So that phrase planted that seed of how could this be mine, and how may I have more power than I think I have. And it changed my life.
So many people find therapy re-traumatizing. How does your method create objective healing instead of endless talking?
We don't do this whole weekly come in and tell me your problems thing. When I work with my clients, I have a VIP program called Curse Breakers. And people come to work with me intensively for like 6 months, and we change everything, because they'll come in and like the first 3 sessions tops will be you telling me about everything that's gone wrong in your life, because I need to know, we need to acknowledge it. And that is the first stage, is acknowledging the stuff that has happened. And if you don't acknowledge it, you can't move forward from it, because it will stay trapped, and we don't really know what we're fixing if we don't acknowledge what's going on. But the typical model would be that you would come in and every week you'd go, okay, I've had this problem, I've had this problem, I've had this problem, and you focus on your problems.
Yes.
The problem is what you focus on increases.
Yeah.
So if you're focusing on my life is terrible, my parents were awful, my husband's horrible, and my boss is terrible, and this is terrible, and this is terrible, what are you seeing? Terribleness, terribleness, terribleness everywhere you look. So what we begin to do is that we start off with, okay, what has actually happened and the truth of it. Right. And of course that will be a subjective truth, because there are always there's always a triangle in everything, and it's your truth, their truth, and actually what happened was somewhere in the middle. So we have to look at the subjective truth of what people believe has happened to them, and then we begin to reprogram things. So we start to reframe those situations, because when people are in the victimhood mindset, it's everything is about them. I know the humorous thing about depression is it's an oxymoron, is it's like nobody cares about me, and yet everybody's always trying to attack me and hurt me and damage me. So it's like you're the center of the universe and none at the same time. So we have to kind of we have to change things around. And I think one of the things that we do is reframing, is how is this not about you? Because the problem is when you're in victim mindset, it's everybody's out to get you.
Yes.
So you go into work, and because you're feeling bad, somebody looks at you off, and you think, well, that person's being mean to me as well. So it's like, well, how is that not about you? How is that maybe about, Jeffrey over there that's having a terrible day? So we start to reframe it to look at things more objectively instead of subjectively, because when you're in that mindset, everything is about you. It's a very selfish disorder, and mental health. And I know it's an awful thing to say, and people are going to hate it, but mental health, when you are suffering from depression and anxiety and those things, you're very, very inward facing. Very inward facing. It's everything is about you. How you feel, problems you're going through, and so forth. So we have to change that round. That's one of the first things we have to change around, is to try to bring some objective truth to things. And when you bring objective truth to things, the victimhood complex disappears, because it's like, oh, hang on a minute, these people aren't trying to ruin my life. It's just, maybe they were having a bad day, or maybe this is nothing to do with me, actually. And when you recognize nothing is to do with you, it's actually a very freeing thing, that people aren't out to get you. It's just that sometimes you happen to be there when people are in a bad mood.
Oh, I love it. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions about trauma recovery and consciousness work?
So biggest misconception about trauma recovery, I think, is that it has to take ages, that it's a long-term process. You have to take ages to do it, and you have to go and talk through all your trauma and just keep re-traumatizing yourself all the time, which is not true. It doesn't have to take a long period of time. I literally retrain my people's brains in 6 months, and then, I'll work with them, going forward. But 6 months is all it'll take to completely rewrite everything if you're committed to it.
Right.
And
let's know.
Yeah, isn't it? I know, right? It took me 20 years to find this stuff out. So I'm like, I say to my clients, feel free to not pay me and not do as you're told, but it'll take you probably about 20 years of everything to try everything. So, but it doesn't have to take a long time, and it doesn't have to be traumatizing. It doesn't have to be something that, you sit and it's heavy and it's awful. We laugh a lot in our sessions, with my clients. There's a lot of laughter, because I think when you laugh about things and you find humor in things, I think that makes things a lot easier as well. And within consciousness, I talk about being a consciousness teacher, because I think that the thing that will save the world is consciousness. If we are all aware of ourselves and our subconscious programs and our triggers, this is the thing that heals the world. Because we stop projecting that onto other people, that stops arguments, it stops wars, it stops everything. So the thing that I feel that will completely heal and change the world is people becoming more conscious. And through that consciousness, we recognize that there is a unity that we're all experiencing, and that unity will heal the world. So this is that joy revolution that I talk about, is that, by healing one person, not only are they feeling better, but they also heal other people as they move around the world. Because my clients are always messaging me saying, like, I need to make some bands. It's like, what would Laura say instead of what would Jesus do? What would Laura say? And they share my words, and they share the teachings that I give them with the people that are around them. And this healing journey seems to spread out. And it's just such a beautiful thing. It's that, hurt people do hurt people, but healed people really heal people.
Oh, I love it. Now, my last two questions for you. The first one, I'm going to teleport you back to the younger you. If you could go back and give yourself 3 nuggets of wisdom, based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would those 3 nuggets of wisdom be?
Oh, the first one would be to not take everything so seriously. To recognize that there is lightness in the world, and to focus on that, because that's more important than the things that feel like death, things that feel like so bad and so awful that I couldn't survive it. Obviously, as a child, bullying and being picked on and not being chosen for things and not having friends, that felt like hell at the time. So I would tell her that that's not as serious as it feels at the time. I would offer the idea that your spirituality and your soul is the most important thing for you to focus on throughout your life. And that if you focus on that relationship with yourself and with something higher than yourself, then everything else falls into place much easier. I think a lot of people neglect their own consciousness, their own soul, their own spirit through this work and through the work in their lives. And they focus more on worldly things. And they think that worldly success will bring them everything that will make them happy and so forth, money and riches and these sorts of things. And as somebody that's, had a modicum of success and hit quite a lot of her goals in life, the recognition that those things actually they don't really change anything. What changes things in your life is how you feel about yourself and your relationship with yourself and your relationship with somebody higher than yourself. Whatever that is, I like to call it Gus, because not everybody likes to talk about God. There's a lot of kind of religion issues, but I have a very deep experience with God. But Gus, God, the universe, source, whatever that is to you, whether it's your higher self or whatever you represent, that's a very important thing to have connection to. And the third one would probably be stay away from boys. Stay away from boys until you're ready to marry somebody. That would have saved so much problems.
I love it. Now, my last question is there anything else I should have asked you and I didn't?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a very big question, isn't it? There's probably loads of things you could have asked me that would have been interesting. No, I don't know. I've got a very interesting life, a very interesting story, and huge amounts of knowledge in my brain. I've been somebody that, as I said, had hyperfocuses for 20 plus years on things. So, one of my deepest fascinations is the occult, which is a weird one that most people don't tend to study. So if there's anything, I think that's how I bring spirituality in. So, we talk about all sorts over on my YouTube channel and where I am. So people can come find out more about me and see all of the depths of the madness and weirdness inside my own brain there if they want to learn more. But I think that the most important thing really from this is just remember that no matter what happens to you in your life, just keep that tiny little seed of hope, and it will grow through those dark times. And no matter where you are in life, there is always something to be hopeful for, even if you don't feel it at the moment. For those people that feel like giving up, take my story as a beacon of light, that actually, if you do keep going and you hold on to that hope, that you can build a life that you're so happy with. I sometimes have to pinch myself in the life that I've created for myself. And as I said, I kept that promise to 15-year-old self that I was gonna make good and that I was going to do better in the world. And I think if you have that bigger mission and you keep doing those missions for something bigger than yourself, nothing can stop you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming online and sharing your incredible story with us today. It's so inspiring to see such positivity coming out of what could have been a very tragic life. And thank you for empowering other women to see the light as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We're a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So if you are in search of joy, if you are looking for something that can help you break that cycle of depression, anxiety, here is an amazing young woman who could help you get there. So tune in again tomorrow, everybody, when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Laura, thanks again for the interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story. Wonderful.